Suppose
Yeah.
put up the agenda. Let's do that.
And we'll pull up the agenda. So first order of business is the approval of the agenda. Once I get that up. Any members have any changes to the agenda for today? All right, hearing none, then the agenda is approved. And so second order of business is approval of the October 2nd meeting minutes for this committee.
I'll move approval.
I'll
Chad
second.
Ellis with Hennepin County.
Thanks,
Kathleen.
Chad. And a second by Kathleen. Thank you. We have a first and a second. Any further discussion on the meeting minutes from October? And seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye by roll call. Joe?
Anoka County, McPherson.
Aye.
Carver County, Robgent. Or anybody. Dakota County, Laborie.
Aye.
Hennepin County, Ellos.
Aye.
Ramsey County, Isaacson.
Aye.
Scott County, Jensen.
Aye.
Washington County, Leitner.
Aye.
7W, Witter.
Aye.
Tab, Kotsukos.
Aye.
MTS, Met Council, Steve Peterson.
Aye.
Community Development, Boylan. Metro Transit, Harrington.
Aye.
MnDOT Metro, McCartney.
Aye.
I heard that, barely. MPCA, AO.
Lauren Dickerson, aye.
Mac, Reef. Suburban Transit, Fighton.
Aye.
MnDOT Freight, Meyer. Deed, Eddie.
Abstain.
Bicycle, Sabota.
Aye.
Pedestrian, Turner Bargain. Metro Cities. Oh man, my roster's not up to date. Chanhassen, Howley. Lakeville, Omi.
Aye.
Eden Prairie, Ellis.
Aye.
Fridley, Kozlucher. Brooklyn Park, Ruiz. Plymouth, Thompson.
Aye.
Woodbury, Hartzell.
Aye.
And we have a new member, Ross Mathis. Ross, are you here?
Russ.
Russ Mathis, sorry. Thank you. I don't hear him, and I don't remember what city he's from. Somebody can tell me if it
Egan.
matters. Egan. All right, not here. And let's see, Minneapolis Engineering, Hager.
Aye.
Planning, Mail.
Aye.
St. Paul Engineering, Nick Peterson.
Aye.
And Planning, Collins.
Aye.
The ayes have it.
Great. Many meeting minutes are approved. Is there anyone here from the public to address the committee today?
Chair, nobody has approached us.
Okay, then we will move on to the tab report. Elaine.
Thanks, Chair. TAB met on October 16th. Chair Hovland reported that the TAB Executive Committee had met prior to TAB. They discussed elements of the active transportation item that was on the agenda, and then heard information on the legislative imposed mandate on MnDOT on greenhouse gas reduction strategies through December 2025. And MnDOT staff will be presenting the information at the November TAB meeting. For the MnDOT report, Connie Siebgen reported MnDOT is getting ready for the winter. MnDOT has challenges and they're looking for more people to work to help plow snow. As of the TAB meeting, there had been 338 fatalities, and it is projected to be more than 400 by the end of the year. For the MPCA, Frank Kolash reported that there are a number of grants open for climate resiliency in local communities. One is for planning grants for local communities. Another is for implementation of local resiliency actions by local or tribal governments. And then for the Diesel Emissions Reductions Act, MPCA anticipates the next round of grants will be open in November. And then EPA announced that they have an additional $1 billion for electric school buses throughout the country. And the funding will be available for electric school buses and bus charging infrastructure. The Metropolitan Airports Commission, Bridget Reef, reported that MAC is working on the 2025 operating budget. Revenues are forecasted for 2025 to be approximately $500 million. And the operating budget will be approved in December along with the capital program. And the capital program for 7 years is approximately $3.5 billion. For the Metropolitan Council report, Barbeau reported that Network Now is out for public comment. Some routes that were suspended during COVID will be discontinued. And the comment periods for both the Regional Development Guide and the Transportation Policy Plan closed, and the comments were being processed. For the Suburban Transit Association, Gary Hanson reported that Maple Grove Transit and Plymouth Metrolink issued a request for proposals for a joint transit study to improve service connections in the Northwest Metro. And MBTA is planning to expand its Connect microtransit service to Prior Lake and Shakopee starting in January. For business items, TAB approved the 2 streamlined tip amendments that were approved by TAC. One was for adding 3 projects in 7W, and the other was 7 projects throughout the metro area. They also approved an item for the active transportation project grant requirements. They approved the following pilot grant management policies and authorized staff to execute grant agreements. So the program year recipients of the active transportation grants must prepare and release the project construction contract for bids prior to December 31st, 2026, or the grant award will be subject to review and potential cancellation by TAB. Grant funding disbursements, grant recipients will be awarded 50% of the grant funds upon grant execution, and the remaining 50% of funds will be reimbursed as costs are incurred above the initial 50% cost. Eligible project costs, the Regional Solicitation's eligible project cost policy will apply. Project plan documentation, grant recipients will be required to submit final construction plan sheets prior to project bidding. Project scope change policy, they will follow the Regional Solicitation scope change policy. Right-of-way acquisition, right-of-way documentation to confirm ownership of property will be required, but acquisition certifications will not be required prior to release of grant funds. For environmental review, documentation will not be required. And small disadvantaged business contracting program, projects receiving more than $750,000 in grant funding and that will bid out work to a subcontracting firm are required to participate in the Metropolitan Council's underutilized business program for construction contracting. However, if a grant recipient has an equivalent adopted program, this requirement will be waived. And this replaces the DBE contracting part that's with the federal projects. Now, all these are part of the pilot projects, so they are subject to be changed as they for the evaluation for the next round of projects. So for the pilot projects, they're going to see how this works out. And then they had an information item on updating for the solicitation evaluation. The policymaker work group, and our next meeting is November 20th, and there will be a workshop after TAB on December 18th on potential application categories and the overall structure of the solicitation. And this will be open to all TAB and Council Transportation Committee members. And there was a information item, that strategic highway safety plan and equity evaluation of regional transportation investment processes. And that's my report.
Thank you, Elaine. Are there any questions from members for Elaine on the TAB report? Seeing none, hearing none, then we will move on to committee reports. So I'm just going to go through a few announcements from the TAC Executive Committee this morning before we go to our 2 action items. The first one is maybe a heads up. In December, there is a workshop on the regional solicitation after tab on 12/18. So Elaine and Joe, if there's any information we can get sent out to TAC members on that, I think that would be helpful for them to have. And then also just a heads up for your calendar management, the 2025 meeting series for the TAC meetings is not out on your calendars yet. And the staff who set those up are not in the office right now and will be returning soon enough. They'll be getting that out, but if you are having challenges, I know I am, with things already getting set up in 2025, you might want to go into your calendar and put a hold on your calendar so that you're not having to juggle things once those meetings are sent out from Met Council staff. And then just a reminder that in January, please hold the time on January 8th, as we'll meet a week later due to the holiday if there is a meeting in January. And then later on today, after all of the information items, we will adjourn the TAC meeting. But then everyone is asked to go into the breakout sessions, which are set up according to agency, city, and county groups. And each group will be asked to identify a TAC chair nominee. And then just for awareness, per our informal process, the next TAC chair would be a county representative. Those nominees, will be brought back to the December TAC meeting, and TAC will vote to confirm the next TAC chair in December. Any TAC members that are interested in serving as vice chair or chair of FMP or the planning subcommittees, please reach out to Joe and Elaine with a quick email and let them know, because then they can share that information with the next TAC chair for their consideration. Those appointments are made by the next TAC chair. Any questions on any of those items before we move into the action items today?
Chair, I'm sharing my screen, so I cannot find how to raise my hand, so sorry. I'll also say that I'm not 100%, but I'm fairly sure that in 2025, we're going to start using Teams, which I know makes at least some of you happy, over WebEx. And I guess me, now that I can't figure out how to raise my hand when I'm sharing my screen, I'm happy to.
Great. All right, seeing no hands up or any questions from members, then I am going to ask Joe to walk us through the two streamlined tip amendment items on our. Go ahead, Joe.
Thanks, Chair. I apologize. I just got an email from Russ. You can see and hear the meeting, but I can't be heard. Okay, sorry. So we have two streamlined tip amendments here. This first one has 6 projects on it, and it is 6 projects that were approved on August 28th at the TAB meeting. And then by council for the regional solicitation. And of course, we approved over 50 projects for the solicitation, but we're getting 6 of them into the tip primarily for timing reasons. So I'm going to go briefly through those 6, and as you know, having been through the scoring process and whatnot, they are fairly well vetted, but it's probably worth knowing them a little bit. So this is the city of Anoka's St. Francis Boulevard, Minnesota 47 reconstruction and railroad grade separation from Pleasant Street to McKinley Street. And here it is on a map. This is a 2028 project, but we're getting it in because of the fact that there's a grade separation. It's probably not a concern for February 1st deadline, but that's why that's here. The rest of these are 25 or 26 projects. And so with 2026, a big chunk of fiscal year 2026 actually does occur when the 25 to 28 tip is active. So this is just a way to assure that there's no scrambling late in the process while we're while we're waiting to approve the next tip. So we're juggling technically 3 tips right now. So the second one is, here it is, sorry, from Carver County. It is their reconstruction of Minnesota 5 from Hazeltine Boulevard to Century Boulevard and from 82nd Street to Tanaduna Drive in Chanhassen. $15 million, $7 million federal, mapped with a point. Next is Metro Council's micro on-demand transit service in and around the city of Minnetonka. The total project cost is $5.3 million with $4.2 million federal. It's a split between capital in 2026 and operating in 2028. Next, we have Metro Transit Blue Line Franklin Street renovation, station renovation. There on that dot. And this includes 2 sets of stairs, vertical circulation buildings, and accessibility improvements, $12.7 million with $7 million federal. We have Bloomington's Normandale Boulevard Sidewalk Project, which includes ADA curb ramps, traffic signals, and retaining walls, $2 million federal, $2.7 million total. There's our map. And finally, we have the Egan Bus Garage Modernization Project, $2.67 million, $2.1 million federal. And here is the location of that station, or of that garage. And that is what we have for this tip amendment. And with that, I would stand for questions.
Are there any questions for Joe on item number 2024-46? If not, is there anyone who would like to move this item?
Madam Chair, this is Joe with Anoka County. I'll move this item.
Thanks, Joe. Is there a second?
Adam Harrington with Metro Transit. I'll second.
Thank you, Adam. We have a first and a second. Any further discussion on this item? Seeing and hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye by roll call. Joe?
Anoka County, McPherson.
Aye.
Carver County.
Aye.
Dakota County, Laborie.
Aye.
Hennepin County, Ellis.
Aye.
Ramsey County, Isaacson.
Aye.
Scott County, Jensen.
Aye.
Washington County, Leitner.
Aye.
7W Witter.
Aye.
Tab Kotsukos.
Aye.
MTS Steve Peterson.
Aye.
Community Development, Patrick Boylan. Metro Transit, Harrington.
Aye.
MPCA, Dickerson.
Aye.
Mac Reef. Oh, gotcha. Mac Reef, you here?
I am. Aye.
Okay. Suburban Transit, Fighton.
Aye.
Freight, Meyer. Deed, Eddie.
Aye.
Oh, I missed you, Molly. Metro District, Molly McCartney.
Aye.
Skip right over name. Sabota, Bicycle.
Aye.
Pedestrian, Turner Bargain. Egan Mathis, I think I did see you.
Aye.
And please let me know, Russ, did I pronounce your last name right?
Yep, that's right, Joe. Thank you.
Thanks. Chanhassen Howley. Nope. Lakeville Omi.
Aye.
Eden Prairie Ellis.
Aye.
Kozlucher, Fridley Kozlucher.
Aye.
Brooklyn Park Ruiz. Plymouth Thompson.
Aye.
Woodbury Hartzell.
Aye.
Engineering, Minneapolis Engineering Hager.
Aye.
Planning Mayell.
Aye.
St. Paul Engineering Peterson.
Aye.
And Planning Collins.
Aye.
Chair, the ayes have it with a lot more votes than on the minutes, so perhaps there was some reason people were tired and didn't get here on time.
All right, great. Thanks, everyone. That item carries, and we'll move to 2024-47.
Okay, this is a simpler tip amendment, although a little more unusual than we usually get. This is called the Rest in Red Pilot Study. It's a little bit new to, not new, but unusual to what we usually do here. And it is because there is federal surface transportation programming money. So MnDOT and Ramsey County are exploring using a signal detection and analysis to better understand the capabilities of the technology regarding the use of implementing a rest and red programming of its traffic signals. During non-peak periods of operation, traffic signals may be set up to the stop/red phase until a vehicle or pedestrian detection is received by the signal system. The project costs are estimated at $75,000. This will include detection of up to 4 sites for 14 days. There will be 2 treatment sites and 2 control sites. Treatment sites could be an intersection or a corridor. Project management, presentation, and final report will also be included. So this is HSIP funding, and it really comes more from central office than Metro District. And that's all I have, and we do have some MnDOT here in case there's any other questions about this. But with that, I stand for questions.
Any questions for Joe or anyone who would like to move this item forward?
Madam Chair, Brian Isaacson, Ramsey County. I'd like to move this.
Thanks, Brian. We have a first. Is there a second?
Chris
Molly
Hartzell, second.
McCartney, I'll second.
Oh, I heard Chris before Molly.
Sounds
So you've
good.
got a second. First and a second, any further discussion on this item? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Joe?
Anoka County, McPherson.
Aye.
Carver County, Rubjent. Here for one. Dakota County, Lebury.
Aye.
Hennepin County, Ellos.
Aye.
Ramsey County, Isaacson.
Aye.
Scott County, Jensen.
Aye.
Washington County, Leitner.
Aye.
7W, Witter.
Aye.
Tab, Kotsukos.
Aye.
MTS, Steve Peterson.
Aye.
Metro Transit, Harrington.
Aye.
MnDOT Metro, McCartney.
Aye.
MPCA, Dickerson.
Aye.
MAC, Reef.
Aye.
Suburban Transit, Fighton.
Aye.
MnDOT Freight, Meyer. Oh, you weren't here. Never mind. Deed, Eddie.
Aye.
Bicycle, Sabota.
Aye.
Egan, Mathis.
Aye.
Lakeville, Omi.
Aye.
Eden Prairie, Ellis.
Aye.
Fridley, Kozlucher.
Aye.
Plymouth, Thompson.
Aye.
Woodbury, Hartzell.
Aye.
Minneapolis Planning, or Engineering, Hager.
Aye.
Minneapolis Planning, Mayell.
Aye.
St. Paul Engineering, Nick Peterson.
Aye.
St. Paul Planning, Collins.
Aye.
Chair, the ayes have it. And I did skip anybody who hadn't called yet or voted yet. So if I missed you, let me know.
Okay, great. That item carries forward. Thank you for that. And that concludes the executive committee report. And Gina, is there anything from I know you didn't meet, but is there anything you wanted to report from the planning committee?
No, other than that, we will be meeting next week and we have several agenda items.
Great.
Thank you.
So then we will move to the funding and programming committee. Michael.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, the funding and programming committee met. Our only action item for consideration was a TIP amendment for a regionally significant project for the 494 E-ZPass extension improvements. And this is a result of MnDOT and Met Council receiving over $130 million in a federal infra grant. And that will continue the 494 investment in the Richfield and Bloomington areas. And I know Robbie may have a few things to add, as well as Molly McCartney from MnDOT. So I will defer to Robbie at this time, but this did pass unanimously at the FNP. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Robbie, anything you'd like to add to this item?
Yes, thank you, Chair. This item is to release this for public comment since this is a regionally significant TIP amendment. So if this proceeds past TAC, it'll go to TAB and then be approved for release for public comment. for a 21-day public comment period. And then TAB will consider those comments to approve the tip amendment and then seek concurrence. And that's the only thing I have to add. I'll leave it to Molly or Aaron at MnDOT to fill any gaps on this project.
Thank you. Molly or Aaron, anything you'd like to add?
Chair, I don't have anything else to add, but happy to answer questions.
Great, thank you. Okay, any questions on this item, or would anyone like to move this item? Steve, you've got your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. I'd like to move the staff recommended motion here, and Joe has it on the screen. And just want to make sure that the money came in after F&P, as we've talked about, so that changes the project scope and the money. So to make sure that that is updated, I will make a motion to move what is shown as the staff recommended updated recommendation on the screen there.
Great, thank you, Steve. Is there a second?
Madam Chair, this is Joe with Anoka County. I'll second this.
Thank you, Joe. We have a first and a second. Any further discussion on this item?
Yes, Madam Chair, this is Innocent here with the MPC here.
Go ahead, Innocent.
Yes, I brought this up during the Funding and Programming Committee. Since this an expanded project, and I think I've asked the staff or remainder staff already regarding the necessity to do a greenhouse gas mitigation and assessment on the project. And they had mentioned that will be done because they're still on the initial stage for this. So I need to add that I'm sure this will be done as was promised during the funding and programming meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Innocent. Molly or Aaron, any follow-up on that item? Greenhouse gas evaluation?
Sure, thanks, Chair. Thanks, Innocent. Yes, as we discussed at funding and programming, this project's moving through environmental work right now, and we will have a greenhouse gas analysis done and report out on that.
Thank you. Any further discussion on this item?
This is Lyndon, Madam Chair. So on that point, so are we, Molly, is the idea to get this done and in the tip before the February 25th date? Is that why we're doing this now?
Chair and Lyndon, yes. So this, the amendment adds this phase of the 494 vision into the step prior to the February 2025 deadline that the legislature has for the more for the deadline for the greenhouse gas emissions work. We'll still do the work, as I mentioned, but it won't be held to the same standard that expansion projects will be held to after that deadline.
Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion or questions on this item? All right, seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Joe?
Anoka County, McPherson.
Aye.
Carver County, Robjan.
Aye.
Dakota County, Laborie.
Aye.
Hennepin County, Ellos.
Aye.
Ramsey County, Isaacson.
Aye.
Scott County, Jensen.
Aye.
Washington County, Leitner.
Aye.
7W, Witter.
Aye.
Tab Coordinator, Kotsukos.
Aye.
MTS, Peterson, Steve.
Aye.
Metro Transit, Harrington.
Aye.
MPCA, Dickerson.
Aye.
Or, well, it's been Dickerson.
Or Innocent, I guess, can chime in too.
It doesn't matter.
Now I got to figure out who to put on the minutes for having attended. Mac, Reef.
Aye.
Suburban Transit fighting.
Aye.
Deed Eddie.
Aye.
Bicycle Sabota.
Aye.
Egan Mathis.
Aye.
Lakeville Omi.
Aye.
Eden Prairie Ellis.
Aye.
Fredley Kozlucher.
Aye.
Plymouth Thompson.
Aye.
Woodbury Hartzell.
Aye.
I see an I from Charlie Howley Chanyasin. Got it. Minneapolis Engineering Hager.
Aye.
Planning Mail.
Aye.
St. Paul Engineering Nick Peterson.
Aye.
And Planning Collins.
Aye.
The ayes have it.
All right, that item is approved and concludes our funding and programming report and our action items for today. So we will go to our first information item.
Chair.
Oh,
Chair.
yeah,
Chair,
go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, this is Molly from MindDOT. Joe, you didn't call my name on the roll call. I just want to make sure you get my vote.
Sorry about that. I missed you 2 out of 4 times. Pretty impressive.
Molly, I'd start to take that personally. That's setting a trend.
I'll tell you why. It's because it's old information on the name there, and it says vacant, which it technically was for a few months.
Yep. I'm an aye for the last item.
Gotcha.
Thank you.
Okay. So I am going to turn it over to Jed Hanson now to give us an update on the 2050 Transportation Policy Plan public comments. Go ahead, Jed.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I am going to do a brief summary of the comments that we received from the Imagine 2050 Transportation Policy Plan public comment period. Today, just to prompt some discussion, what we're looking to hear from the TAC today are if these themes that we've pulled out match those main topics that your agency raised, if you have additional feedback about the anticipated key changes that we'll describe today, and if any of those topics need to be highlighted for policymaker discussion. The slide deck that's posted online has a little bit more background information in it that I'll skip today to save some time, but I will point out the structural element again, just to make clear which comments we're covering today. So we coordinated our public comment periods for all of the Imagine 2050 plans this time around to have them occur over the same time. So while we were receiving comments on the Transportation Policy Plan, we were also receiving them on the Regional Development Guide, the Housing Policy Plan, et cetera. And so many agencies submitted combined comment letters that covered topics that addressed multiple plan areas. So today, this presentation does not contain information that covers the left side of the screen, the values, vision, and goals for the most part. Those are being addressed across the Imagine 2050 plans, and so I don't have a summary for those today, but I will cover the specific pieces that cover the Transportation Policy Plan, so the objectives, policies, and actions, the plan narrative, and its investments. So we received roughly 400 comments on the Transportation Policy Plan or transportation-related comments on the Regional Development Guide. Of the organizations that submitted comments, there were 17 cities, 7 counties, 1 state agency, 1 federal agency, and 6 other partners or advocacy organizations. We also received a trailing letter from the Met Council's American Indian Advisory Council. That is not described in this presentation as this was published before then, but we will update this before the tab to include that information. On that note, TAC Planning has also not seen this item. This is going out of order, and so they will also hear this item next week. Just over 100 commenters also provided Likert ratings on the importance of plan objectives and rank ordering of supporting policies through our public comment portal. These comments are not regionally or demographically representative. They're not a random survey sample, but in those ratings, we did have some common themes. There was broad support for the healthy and safe and natural systems goal areas, and mostly supportive responses for the equitable and inclusive and dynamic and resilient objectives. We still receive majority supportive, but relatively higher, somewhat unimportant or not important ratings of specific objectives on climate change, highway reliability, and racial equity. We'll have a more detailed report of this comment volume and the data and findings ahead of the plan's adoption. So some overall themes. Under climate and environment, we heard support for VMT reduction, greenhouse gas reduction, electrification, and related objectives, policies, and actions. We did hear some concern about the application of climate actions across a region with such diverse land uses and varying transportation needs by community. We also heard a continuing concern about the lack of a specific objective related to maintenance and modernization activities. We also heard that the lack of an increased revenue scenario leaves an opportunity to provide more description of unmet investment needs. On the plan's multimodal investment tone, we heard diverging viewpoints, some that are supportive of multimodal considerations being integrated throughout the plan, while others express concern that the plan may overemphasize non-highway transportation. We also received a variety of perspectives on distribution of investment benefits, covering topics like displacement, environmental justice, reparative investments, and geographic distribution of regional funds. For transit specifically, oops, I got these out of order, but for transit, we heard some comments that provided specifics on project development and project governance, and there were a number of comments from transit advocates that support a stronger Met Council role in updating a regional transit vision. We heard support or opposition for specific transit corridors and modal or station preferences, some requests for additional study of specific investments, and many non-agency comments about regional or intercity transit options. We heard desire for discussion of the unallocated regional sales tax revenue, varying perspectives on transit needs and service level by land use, and the need to coordinate those experiences across the region, and the continued importance of safety and security on our transit system. On highway, it was very clear that our stakeholders are unanimous in support for safety, and it's a common priority across the region. On highway mobility, we heard a variety of viewpoints, some supporting highway mobility investments, particularly concerning regional economic needs like freight reliability and serving population growth, and also opposition to those investments and with specific concerns about ongoing environmental justice harms and climate impacts. There were differing viewpoints on whether the plan overemphasizes or underemphasizes those impacts of those investments, and differing viewpoints on the efficacy of those investments on improving travel time reliability and congestion mitigation. We heard specific support or opposition on the objective related to highway reliability and excessive delay, and support for coordinating multimodal investment elements with highway investments. We received a number of comments related to the regional bicycle transportation network about updating the network and changes to criteria, coverage, and tiering, requested updates to regional destinations, further engagement with parks agencies was requested, and increased sensitivity to bicycling network needs that vary by regional geography. Some narrative feedback was provided. We heard support for barrier removal across pedestrian and bicycle systems and related study work. On pedestrian safety, we received specific feedback supporting investments that reduce pedestrian fatalities and serious injuries throughout the region, and specific technical questions or clarifications related to work tasks. We also received some questions about new policies and actions that seek to increase Americans with Disability Act compliance or that promote universal design. Some other themes that we heard on finance, there were a few comments that requested additional discussion of the difference in local revenue availability between city and county governments. On freight, we heard differing perspectives on how freight user needs can conflict or complement safety and environmental justice needs. A variety of suggestions related to intermodal facilities, last mile connections, and e-commerce. Some comments related to comp planning requirements and the impacts of aviation like air quality and noise. Many suggested clarifications or changes to our performance measurement program, requests for agency engagement in scoping various work program items and more detail on community engagement when performing those tasks, and various suggestions to improve the usability and readability of the document. Very long-winded discussion of those comments, and now how we propose to respond to them. So these next two slides are not exhaustive of all of the changes that we're planning to the TPP, but these are the major topics that we thought may pique discussion interest or may want to refer to policymakers if the committee feels so. So for starters, removing the Riverview Corridor Modern Streetcar Locally Preferred Alternative and its funding, and in its place we would add narrative and mapping changes that will demonstrate continued commitment to investment on the corridor. The recently announced Gold Line extension will need to be discussed in the future Transit Way portion. A change to broaden the regional level study of future transit ways in response to that advocacy comment that was described earlier. An objective focused on excessive delay in the related to highway investments will be clarified to match its intent, and the addition of specific highway spot mobility projects. There were also some corrections to the critical urban freight corridors map that will be made, some considerations of RBTN destinations and tiering updates, a number of changes to health actions to address research or work program needs, and general clarification of work program task purposes. Additional narrative and data to discuss access to destinations that was not included in the draft released for public comment, and other minor changes that respond to specific comments, clarifications, or corrections. And just a reminder of where we are on our project timeline. So we're in our revisions phase right now and are working up until the holidays to revise this content, and then actions for TAB to consider its recommendation and forward to the council for adoption will be in the first quarter of next year. And there are those discussion questions. Chair, that is all I have.
Thank you, Jed. Any questions from TAC members or thoughts on these three discussion questions up on the screen? There's a lot of information. Let's give them a second. They're processing.
Yeah, Madam Chair, this is Joe with Anoka County. Jed, appreciate the information and the follow-up on this. I think one other theme that I think was briefly mentioned in here, and that is, that continued difference and review of how the funding gets dispersed through the different areas, through the different land use areas around the metro area. I think will be a key aspect too. So I know you mentioned that in there, but I think that was a big item and a big theme that came through that is important to a lot of us on the call. So just wanted to bring that up, Madam Chair, as an item that we're watching very closely. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Go ahead, Innocent.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The council for including embassy staff in coming up with the transportation policy plan and involving in most of the work groups, including the one for policy actions on greenhouse gas, climate change, and natural systems. And we support the objectives and goals for reduction of VMT, greenhouse reduction, reducing impacts on climate change, electrification policies, and also on some of the actions that were included in the natural systems, water, air, wetlands, and habitats. But what I would just wanted to add is that during the process we're working on this, EPC, Environmental Protection Agency was working on the reducing the standard, making it stricter for PM 2.5, and the standard was reduced from 12 to 9. So making it a little stricter. And if we look at MPCA monitoring result, we don't have 23 and 24 here, we had 21, 22, and it shows that the monitoring side in some places in the region is right on 9 or a little bit above 9. So we're watching that because staff are working to ensure that the reason the monitoring values were up that much wasn't contribution from wildfire. So we looking at the factors to see whether there was factors from wildfires to see what we can do to make sure it's actually below the 9. So I'm just saying that we should be paying attention to that, not only the PM 2.5, but also for NOx in terms of ozone issues. So we, apart from the greenhouse gas, climate change, we should be also be looking at other forms of air pollution, including the ozone, NOx, and also the PM 2.5. So that's just what I wanted to bring up. We really appreciate the work the staff and all the work group did in doing such extensive review and the drafting of the document. Thank you.
Thank you. Good comments, good information. Anyone else who would like to share some thoughts? Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, quick compliment here to Jed, who's done really a great job keeping this organized for, I don't know how many years, Jed, now, but several years of this project. So thanks to Jed, and many other people from our staff that worked on it, but Jed did a lot of the organizing and putting this together. So thanks.
I agree. It was a long process, but it was a good process. I think from our perspective as a local agency participating in that. So well done, Jed. Nice work. Anyone else with thoughts or comments? Jed, did you get what you were looking for? Do you want to nudge with any follow-up questions at all, or?
Yes, I got what I was looking for, and I know that is a lot to absorb today. So if anyone has any trailing feedback to provide, my email is on the slide.
Great. And remind me, was this presentation already at tab, or is this going to tab?
This will go to December tab.
Okay, great. So if you all want to make sure you're checking in with your tab members and make sure they're up to speed on this one, that would be helpful for them, I'm sure. Okay, so with that, seeing Innocent and Steve, your hands are still up. I'm assuming those are from before. Then we will move to the next item, which is target setting. It's a continued conversation from last month regarding the greenhouse gas reduction legislation. And Anna, are you here?
Yes, Chair, I am here just working on getting this shared.
Chair, in the meantime, I'm going to point out that Jed mentioned in the chat, just for those who might be watching online, that it's the November tab meeting that this will be shared at. He misspoke when he said December.
Perfect. Thank you.
Sorry, bear with me. I'm just trying to make sure I can see if anyone raises their hand or anything.
It's a WebEx thing.
Yeah, it's definitely a WebEx thing. So the team's very excited for you all. Thank you, Chair, for having me today back. Again, I'm Anna Pierce. I'm with MnDOT's Sustainability and Public Health, and I'm our Carbon Reduction Program Coordinator. Today, I just wanted to touch on and share more where our approaches have headed. We have 2 approaches with 3 regional scenarios, if you all remember, and we have a priority activity to discuss some of the levers and help us figure out what the emissions may look like for the second approach that we're looking at. And then we're really here to document questions and share kind of our next steps and process. And then Chris Behrens will be talking about the greenhouse gas impact assessment work that's going on. So really right now, today, I'm going to focus on setting the targets that bridge the gap that we currently have between our Next Gen Energy Act goals and where we're projected to be over these next 5, 10, 15, 20, and 25-year increments. So just as a reminder, the Minnesota State Legislature set that we are to provide an allocation to the metropolitan area as defined in statute, the 7-county metro area of the Twin Cities. So I'm going to talk a lot about today about what that region looks like geographically, what levers are we looking at being able to pull harder on and make some changes to be able to meet these greenhouse gas goals. The legislation also says that we have to account for the differences in feasibility and extent of emissions reduction across forms of land use and across regions of the state. Those targets may include performance-based targets based on our DOT districts, geographic regions, per capita calculations, transportation mode, or any combination. And then those targets must be allocated on a 5-year or more frequent basis. So you'll hear me talk a lot about 5-year increments. So we've seen this before last month in talking about that we have our existing our existing emissions of what our greenhouse gas emissions have been up through 2020 are shown on here. We have received 2021 and 2022 emissions for tailpipe, and those are looking like they are creeping back up towards that 33 million for just tailpipe only. So when we look at the total transportation sector, it's closer back up to where we were in 2018. So it really does follow kind of where this projected baseline was expected to be. And that's that dashed line. So that's what we have previously thought that forecast to be. As mentioned last month, we have since used the vision eval model to model where, based on our current projections of current policies that we have in place, technology, and what we know now as of 2020, 2021, 2022, 23, 24, what emissions reductions and shifts in transportation mode and increased travel options we have. Our projected and modeled forecast is this orange dashed line. So that's really where we're expecting to go and be actually hitting, not this dashed blue line up here. So then we end up seeing that we have between where our targets are that are highlighted on this light blue line, and that the targets are indicated by next gen, and this 15% reduction by 2015, which we didn't meet, 30% reduction by 2025, which we are not expecting to meet, but then a 50% reduction by 2030 and net zero by 2050. That's what's in state statute for our greenhouse gas reductions. And then in the statewide multimodal transportation plan, 65% reduction and then 80% reduction in 2040. And then we split the difference in 2045 to give us those 5-year increments. So we have this gap, this purple area that we really need to narrow and divide out regionally, how we're going to achieve those goals. So we talked a little bit last month, I believe, about the two approaches and how we look to close the gap. And what we have looked at and are continuing to look at is a per capita based emissions target for each target year. So that'd be based on the number of people in the region in that year. So you divide out that gap based on the number of people, and then you would get a value. Then we have been looking at regional priorities plus per capita. So that's taking into regional priorities or priority levers in which the geographic region is willing to make changes or revisions to invest more in, let's say, transit or shift in fuels or things like that. So we'll talk a lot more about that here in a moment. We also then looked at different regional scenarios, and so how we break out the targets. You'll see here that scenarios 1, 2, and 3, the Metropolitan Council 7-county metro area as defined by state statute is listed under all 3 scenarios. So there will be a target assigned for the 7-county area, no matter what. So it just really depends for your area if we choose to go with a per capita approach or more of that regional priorities plus per capita. So we're gathering that input today and over the next month to make a decision in December. Really the difference here is how do we break out greater Minnesota? Do we have one target for the rest of everywhere outside that metro area? Or do we break it out under scenario 2 by the other MPO urbanized areas throughout the state and then one overall greater Minnesota rural area target? Or do we break that target, that rural portion out further by area transportation partnership, which they have a lot of influence on where the funds get programmed in rural areas and how we look to reduce emissions in those areas. We have received initial feedback that scenario 3 is the preferred approach to break out so that folks have more accountability and can see themselves more in the work and how they actually achieve those targets. So diving into what the per capita approach would look like. And I'm going to ask that if Chris Behrens or Chair, if you see anyone raise their hand or drop comments in the chat, if you could let me know, that would be wonderful. So per capita, based on the number of people that live in a region, and this is based on the forecasted population in a region too for each of those targeted years. So when we look at some examples here, we have that scenario 3, so breaking it out by all those regions. What would be the gap the Met Council area, 7-county area would be responsible for? We're identifying a gap of about 8.42 million CO2 equivalent emissions in 2035. So what that accounts to is that the Met Council would be responsible for about 4.642 million emissions for that target year of 2035. When we look at 2050, the gap is increasing, it almost doubles. So we go up to about 16 million CO2 equivalent emissions that we are forecasted to still be emitting at that point in time when our target is 0 or net zero. So when we look at then the forecasted population, it has grown for the Met Council area, but also the gap has grown. It has almost doubled. So that's why we see kind of this bigger jump. But if we compare the Met Council area to, let's say, the St. Cloud APO area, the population has in the APO also grown, and also, as we note, that the gap has grown. So this is all like proportional to what the population growth is plus the gap growth. So that's kind of the per capita breakdown. Now, as we look a little bit more into the regional priorities plus per capita, we're going to talk about some of the levers and how we coordinate some of those and really identify what the priorities are for the area. We have started to have the conversation at the staff level, asking them to put on kind of that hat of what would the committees, the technical committees like yourselves say, what are the regional priorities? What would the tab say? What would cities and counties in the area say based on their knowledge of the area? So we started to have those conversations, but we're here today really to gut check and make sure that you help us identify what those priority levers are. So before we get into the activity that I'm going to have y'all do, just to understand a little bit of what we're talking about. Some of these levers have values that are only available at a statewide level and maybe actually only influenced at the statewide level. So some of the pricing things that we kind of talk about and see. Then we have values that are only available at the 8 MPO urbanized areas, and then like a 9th value for the remainder of greater Minnesota rural area, just based on the data that we have and what's available there. But a lot of our values are actually available more at that county level throughout Minnesota. When I talk about values, I'm talking about that when we're asking for the data to support each of these levers in our modeling process, they can either be continuous numbers like 0 to infinite numbers, or they may be asking for a percentage. So for example, looking at, we're expecting a 10% increase in multifamily housing by 2035. That might be one of the inputs that we would use for the levers. Today, I'm not asking for those details. We'll go back to council staff to help get those details once we figure out what those priorities are. So when we look at the different levers that are available, I'm gonna pause here for a minute. There's a lot of levers on here, and so the next few slides are going to have the same content. They're just gonna add kind of a layer to them. So when we look at all these levers that are available to us in the vision eval model, which we're using to help understand our emissions reduction potential over the next 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 years. These are the levers we have available to us. And we've grouped them into 4 categories here. So we have transportation options that really includes expanding miles of transit service, shifting shorter trips to active transportation, increasing density of walkable intersections in communities, and then reducing lane miles of freeways and arterials. We have a second category of land use that really focuses more on those land use decision makings. So reducing parking spaces, potentially charging a fee for parking, increasing options for mixed use living spaces, flexible options for increased household sizes, also increasing options for multifamily housing, expanding urban areas, planning for connected and rural growth. Then we have a third category that we have included right now in the model that is really about fuels and electrification and like that shift in what those fuels may be. So we see things like reducing carbon-based transit fuels, increasing zero emissions or electric vehicle adoption for transit vehicles, car service vehicles like Ubers or Lyfts, heavy truck vehicles, and then commercial service vehicles. We also see increasing charging availability at home as a lever. And then we have reducing the number of older household and commercial vehicles, and then increasing electric vehicle sales for household use. Then we have a whole series of other strategies that we have not included or used in our model yet. Because a number of them require state legislation or directives and are really more political in nature than some of these other ones. So we have under those, we have increased prices of fuel and power, implement vehicle ownership taxes, increase pay-as-you-drive insurance, implement vehicle use taxes, more of a charge per mile vehicle travel or congestion management charges, deploying traffic operation strategies, increasing travel demand management strategies like commuter programs or telecommuting, and then also reducing fuel carbon intensity, which are much more like our clean fuel standards. So this slide literally just is looking at that. Keep note of the color options here that were transportation options, more this like light blue, green, turquoise color. We have land use in brown and fuels in purple. So as we start to think about these, we've crossed out then the levers that are really only able to be impacted by statewide decision making to really narrow the focus here on more of this regional perspective of what are we actually asking regionally. So when we remove those, these are really the levers that are able to be impacted by local and regional decision making. So when you take a look at these levers and through this next activity here, I'm going to ask that you start to think about which of these do you feel are easiest to increase and advance? Which of the levers do you feel are hardest to advance? Which do you feel like will reduce the most greenhouse gas emissions? And then which are the highest priority for your region? Think geographically. And how is the city or the county going to implement this, not just at the MPO level? Also keeping in mind, we have now a continuum kind of what the level of emissions reduction may be for any one of these levers, from low emissions reduction to significant emissions reduction. So you see here, increasing charging availability at home has that lower emissions reduction. It's kind of really that one-off thing. But if we then look at increasing the options for multifamily housing, that could potentially significantly reduce emissions reduction. And combining any of these levers really exponentially lowers those greenhouse gas emissions reduction numbers on their own. So I will put this up on the screen in just a second, but I am going to flip to, and if you are able to open menti.com, there is, and I'll make sure to start it.
Anna, before we go into the Menti exercise, can we just pause and see if there are any questions from TAC members before we go into the exercise?
Absolutely.
Russ, I noted your question in the chat. Did you have a question you wanted to ask right now?
I think Anna's timing was perfect with my need to want to discuss it more. So thank you, Jennifer.
Okay, great. Steve, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Just a baseline question. What are you supplying back to the state legislature? Because you had for the metro area, is it a rate reduction amount, or is it a number of reduction? Because I was looking at the legislation again, and there's the targets, and you had that slide 5 that had the targets. Is it a separate target for the metro area, or is it just an allocation of what the reduction should be for the metro area versus the other areas?
Yeah, and so that's going to depend on the approach, right? So if we choose to just do a per capita, we could essentially just say it's going to be a rate based on the per capita. But if we choose the regional priority plus per capita, we'd most likely be providing a direct like number value based on what our assumed is. I think in either we could provide just an actual like this is the number value. I'll go back. Sorry, like this, of saying, you know, Met Council's target for 2035 or 2050 is 9.106 million. Versus St. Cloud APO urbanized area is 930,000 CO2 emissions. And we'll have targets for each of the 5-year increments. So we'll, because we'll be in 2025, I don't believe we are required to do 2025. So we'll actually provide a 2030, 2035, 2040, 2045, and 2050 value for each of these regions. Okay.
So it depends on the approach a little bit. If it's per capita, you could do a % decrease, like in the targets. I was just kind of wondering how that's going to how it will come together and what you're delivering back.
Yeah, and I think that's a little bit up for discussion right now, but I think we are moving more to having a more answer on what that is.
Okay, thank you, appreciate that.
Thanks, Steve, for the question.
Go ahead, Kathleen.
Thanks, Anna. Thanks, Chair. Where did the regional, if you go to the next slide or the next one, the different levers and like where are those coming from? And as part of the discussion today, are there additional ones? These ones, yeah, the priorities and levers.
Yeah. Thanks, Kathleen, for that question. The vision eval model is what is kind of driving what these levers are. So there we're able to map and really model out what could potentially be impacting the emissions. So you'll note there's not a lot of transportation specific items on here because we know that transportation sector emissions are significantly impacted by our land use decisions, as well as fuels, and then how we do mode shift or transportation options and things like that. So the model's really driving what these levers are listed as on here, so that we can start to map out what potential reduction an area may have. And then based on that information, we'll see what the outstanding gap would be for each of those target years. And then that's where we would take into consideration per capita additionally as part of this target setting approach to help basically assign those extra emissions. And then over the next year, we'll work directly with everyone in the 7-county area to figure out, okay, what are the actual things that are going to impact this? So if it's a shift to short trips to active transportation, okay, is it an increase in bike ped network projects? What's some policy changes that might need to happen that can help bridge some of that gap further? Are there land use decisions that at a city you may be able to make some revisions or increase certain things that are going to cause some reductions? What are some of those things that we can work on together that are a little more detailed? These levers are very pretty high level in concept right now.
Okay, and we had one question pop up in the chat, so I will read that for the public record. And it's just, what is the definition for the purposes of this exercise here of an electric vehicle?
Sorry, for the purposes.
Oh, sorry, Madam Chair, I have my hand up, but I know it's hard to see with the screen sharing and everything with this platform. Quick question for Anna, or maybe a comment on the fuels portion here under the levers. you know, one thing I've seen in a number of different seminars and information things online, the electrical or electric vehicle industry right now is kind of hitting some barriers with finding batteries, finding the materials to construct batteries. I know different vendors are looking at solid state batteries because the materials for that are more readily available versus the lithium and that type of thing. So based on what I've seen in those discussions and some of these seminars is, you know, the reality is in the next 10 years, it may not be, it may even be hard to approach like a 7% of our vehicles on the road are ever going to hit electrification. So maybe under this fuels section, we got to look at alternative fuel sources beyond electric. I know there's a lot of emphasis being put into this, into electrical charging stations, that type of thing, but I know there's a lot of other fuels that are being explored. So just a comment from the peanut gallery about that, that just everything I've seen and been watching as this thing unfolds is there's going to be some significant limitations as far as batteries and getting that into the hands of the public. So thanks.
Thanks, Joe. And then I'm
Thanks, Joe.
guessing the previous question is probably, you know, are we talking about e-bikes? Are we talking about just, you know, passenger car vehicles? Like, you know, for purposes of your exercise here, maybe if we could clarify that.
Yeah, typically, and thank you, Chair, for reading that question out loud. The definition of an electric vehicle is something that is going to be an electric motor that draws electricity from a battery and is capable of being charged by an external source. What we're not talking about here is more of those e-bikes. We're talking more about like your single occupancy vehicles or larger type of vehicles.
Okay. Go ahead, Russ.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So yeah, just expanding on that, I had the question. So, I mean, are we talking about hybrids, plug-in hybrids? Are we talking about, like to Joe's point, hydrogen fuel cells? That's how tightly defined is the electric vehicle from what you just stated, Anna? It seems like it limits the potential to expand it to what I think Joe was suggesting.
Yeah. So the model actually asks us to put in the percentage of, like, if we're looking at increased zero emission or electric vehicle adoption for commercial service vehicles, for example, it's going to actually ask us to put in the percentage of light duty commercial vehicles that are plug-in hybrid, battery electric, or internal combustion engine for that given year in a percentage value. So it's actually asking, like, what is kind of the makeup of that specific vehicle market. The model does have some limitations right now that it's not talking about hydrogen or some of those in that way. But if we go back to some of these like other strategies, if we're looking at more of like a clean fuel standards or something like that, that's where that's other strategy of reduced fuel carbon intensity starts to come into play.
Now, I'm just going to make a plug on if there's a way for your model to actually consider more of the e-bikes in your model, because I think that is a key way of shifting those short trips to active transportation. I think e-bikes are a huge way that makes that more possible and feasible for a good chunk of the population. So you're not going to be able to solve that right now, but I would just make that plug.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Yeah, that is something that is a little bit of a challenge of this model. Like I said, it's a little higher level and we don't quite get into the nitty gritty of some of that, but it's definitely something that as we start to talk about what causes the shifts in shorter trips to active transportation, e-bikes is a huge component of that, right? Like providing potentially incentives or other things to get more people not taking single occupancy vehicles is going to be a huge change to that. I think this is a great discussion, and I think some of this might actually get captured in some of the activity and helping people think about some of the priority levers and what makes sense for the region. But But if there's any other outstanding questions, I was trying to see if the chat or there's any hands up still that I can clarify the levers so far.
I think we can go into the exercise. I'm not
Yes,
seeing.
Madam Chair.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, for some reason, I don't know, maybe he didn't show up. Yeah, I was looking at the regional priorities and levers, and under the land use aspect, there are certain levers that you mentioned, or probably maybe considering the modeling. From most of research, it shows land use contribute highly on greenhouse emissions, and specifically due to the land use patterns or plans that are being used by some of the local governments and cities. And I was wondering what type of coordination are you going to have with some of these local government, because they're the one that make decisions on land uses, since we do not have like statewide land use control bill or regulations, so that it's actually gain more maybe reductions on when we kind of use some of this as a factor in doing the modeling. Are you having major coordination with cities and counties, or some of the MPOs in terms of land use decisions?
Thank you, Innocent, for that question. When we're setting these targets, we've been coordinating mostly at the MPO level and going to those meetings, technical committee meetings. We have also been coordinating at the area transportation partnership level. So there are cities and counties on those, as well as the technical committees of the MPO or areas have had cities and counties present as well. Fully aware that we as a DOT do not have control over land use. We don't have a state agency on land use. Some states do, which is very interesting of a concept, but we don't. So part of this in setting these targets is figuring out and coordinating with what are those priorities. Is there an interest and a drive and a priority in some of our cities and counties? And that's why I'm coming to you all today to potentially increase options for mixed use living. Is that a land use decision that can be made at a city or county level that's palatable or a priority for the area? And the role of an MPO or us as a DOT is to provide some educational opportunities there and explain some of these things and help start to tie more of that transportation and land use components further together, and then support cities and counties in figuring out what those decisions are. So right now for this, it's a little bit more of a support role at the DOT for providing changes and levers for land use. But it's a necessary change that need to occur for us to actually see significant reductions. So.
A quick question about land use, Madam Chair.
Go ahead, Linda.
Anna, what does plan for connected rural growth mean? And I'm asking that because that seems to be a significant emission reduction activity on your chart.
Thanks, Lyndon. So it's really looking at, when we're looking at more of our rural areas, looking at the number of jobs, households, and employers that are assigned or provided opportunities per acre of rural land. So are we looking at more of that focused growth policies and that we're not doing more sprawl, or are we focusing more on like compact development in that way? So that's kind of what that's looking at. So what are some policies in place for that?
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Lyndon. Okay, so in the interest of time, because I know I don't want to hold you all up here, I am going to ask that if you have another screen or can open a window for menti.com, you should be able to type in this code 93580685 in there. Can I get some, I don't know, is there reactions in WebEx? Like, I don't know. Can someone let me know if you're able to see that?
I'm in.
Okay.
And so I just, members, if you are having technical difficulties, you can go ahead and put that in the chat. But if you have any questions or comments, try and verbalize those for the public record. And I saw another thumbs up. And then, yeah, just in the interest of time, we're approaching 10:30. I know that Chris, you had another part of the presentation after this. We would try to have a goal, trying to wrap up around 10:45, 10:50, because the TAC members will need to adjourn to caucus and discuss a nomination for the next TAC chair yet today.
So, thanks, Madam Chair. In here, if you all can start to fill out what are the top priority levers for that 7-county geographic area, regardless of who implements them, whether it's a city or a county implementing, just asking that folks put in their top 5. And then we're going to take those top 5 and we're going to see how we can kind of narrow it down further. So I'll give about 2 minutes for folks to fill this out. And I'm going to pull up on the screen here those levers too, just so folks can see them a little more along the spectrum or the continuum here.
Can I ask a question while people are filling out?
Yeah. Yes.
Thanks, Anna. So is there a reason why there's expand miles of transit service, but there's nothing about like the speed or reliability or frequency of transit service?
Yeah, and I'm going to ask if Chris Behrens wants to jump in and talk a little bit more about some of these specific lever questions. Yes, and the Menti code is 93580685. Chris, are you able to unmute?
Yeah, I was monitoring the Menti. Could we just restate the question?
Sure, thanks, Chris. I was just asking so I see expand miles of transit service, but nothing about transit speed, reliability, frequency, that type of thing. It was just about expansion, wondering if you could talk to why that's not in here.
Joe Lehman, you've been working much more directly with the modeling. I think you were offering to comment on Kathleen's question.
Can you hear me? Perfect.
Now we can.
So the model takes into account the revenue miles of transit services, and the model as it stands currently does not have the frequency as a potential lever, but we can like look into how that could get incorporated if there's interest around that. The revenue miles being chosen, I think, was really just due to its like wide availability from the National Transit database as an input.
Thanks. Yeah, I think it's kind of the same comment that the chair made about electric vehicles. I think there's rational reasons. Like, I don't know how this is all going to be used, but obviously this regionally is a really big deal. All this effort toward reducing our greenhouse gas emissions. And so making sure that we cannot be confined by what the model can or can't process right now as we are like shifting from these strategies and priorities and how that ends up in funding scenarios and whatnot. I think it'll be pretty important to figure out ways to incorporate pieces of this. Thanks.
Yeah, Kathleen, I think that's a really important point. I would emphasize that, you know, this this initial feasibility process was really an opportunity to do some strategic modeling at kind of a little bit of a higher level, so that we could then kind of take follow-up steps to understand how. But a big question that comes up, as you're alluding to, is that the people want to understand the relative orders of magnitude in terms of impact on emissions reduction, and to get a better sense for that. And I think that's a reminder of what is being asked of us, to just get a better understanding of the sector overall. What are the key levers that reduce emissions? And then thinking back to the actual targets, and should that make you think differently about different regions of the state? Or after looking at all that complexity, should you still kind of keep things fairly simple and think of emissions reduction just on a straightforward per capita basis? Every Minnesotan has kind of an equal share in reducing emissions in the sector. But there's this like tension between keep it simple, just look at per capita emissions, and then also how do you understand the sector better and lean into that complexity? And then you start, there's a lot of levers, and they have different impacts, and we're just trying to start to better quantify that. And then you know, there's going to be a lot of follow-on steps that come after this.
Thanks, Chris, for that. So I see we have about 17 folks putting comments in here. I'm going to share those results right now, and I'm just hoping if folks want to share a couple of reasons as to why they maybe didn't choose flexible options for increased housing sizes or reduced base transit fuel, some of the ones that are more like 4% or under. Or reducing miles of freeways and arterials.
I'll share one. I was part of a 2%er out there, Anna, and it was increased charging availability at home. I know when some of our other staff took this survey, they maybe broadened that, whether right or wrong, to say more public facing charging. And because I don't think that was an option, right? It was just the increased charging at home.
Yep, it's just increased charging at home.
Versus kind of more public facing, which could be something that collectively we do in the public sector. So.
Yep. Thanks, Steve. Anyone else want to say maybe why they didn't select something?
I'm the newbie, so I could probably look foolish and won't be quite as embarrassed as anybody else. But I guess, you know, on the last comment, as far as, you know, I had a question as far as what's the impact on the electrical grid? You know, are we looking that far out? That's what I'm thinking about. I'm also thinking about, are we looking at solar panels at homes? Are we looking at windmills at homes? And then you asked specifically about the reduction of the lane miles of freeways and arterials, and you know, from a transportation perspective, and I'm dealing with congestion and safety and stuff like that. That just doesn't seem to make sense from a practical perspective for me. So I'll stop at that.
Thanks, Russ. Appreciate those comments. So we're going to switch over in the interest of time to the next slide. And I have narrowed down, basically took those top items as priorities. So we're left with expanding miles of transit service, shift short trips to active transportation, increase density of walkable intersections in the community, increase zero emissions or EV adoption for transit, increase zero emissions or EV adoption for commercial service vehicles, and then increase electric vehicle sales for household use, deploy traffic operation strategies, and increase travel demand management strategies such as communal programs and telecommuting. So now you are only able to pick 2 priorities. So if you had to say, these are the absolute 2 we're willing to put our investments in. And I'll just give us just like 2 minutes here to go through this. You can't just pick all the same. That's not gonna work. So I see shift to short trips to active transportation as kind of playing pretty high, also increasing density of walkable intersections in the community, deploying traffic operations strategies. I think we had 1 more response there. Look, now we have 18 responses. So as these kind of keep coming in here, what we're going to do is be taking what the top 2, 3 that shake out here and taking the inputs and asking for inputs like the actual input value. So shift short trips to active transportation. We're going to ask the Met Council staff to help us develop what we need for the data for those. So that would be looking at the vehicle miles traveled that are or could be shifted to transportation. So what are some of those small trips? What might we be able to make those shifts to? And we get that data and then we'll plug that into the model. Then what we get out of that model, we are going to be using if I can fill out this table here. That'll essentially help us fill out this blue center column that fills out it, for example. So we may say out of the 2, 3 priorities that come out of today and some of the discussions we've been having, that we're able to, based on those regional priority levers, reduce 3 million emissions by 2035 for the Met Council 7-county area. We will then add all those up and do the same for the other regions. And what we might come out with is that we actually only close the gap by 6 million. This is a total hypothetical example. Then what we'll do is we'll take those remaining emissions that would be outstanding, so the 2.42 million, and divide that out by the population forecasted for that target year. So then we would add those 2 values together, excuse me, in the blue and yellow columns, and get that total in the black column. And then we'll calculate what that percent of the total gap of emissions are, so you can start to see, okay, is it less, is it more, things like that. We will ultimately then be developing a 2-pager sheet that reports out the results of those 2 different modeling approaches, straight per capita, and then that regional priority plus per capita approach. And we'll be sharing that out to ask for responses via a very short survey, 4 questions that will ask what region would you be a part of, which approach do you prefer, this one or that one, any comments you have, and then also what support would you need in helping to implement this. So we'll be sending that out here by the end of November and asking for input on that. The intent is then we will go back, we'll go to the full tab in December and ask for a supported approach that we will then bring to our commissioner to ultimately set the targets. They do need to be set by February 1st. That's why we have this very quick timeline here. But that doesn't mean by February 1st, once those are set, that we will be done. We are going to continue to work with you all at the city, county level, and the MPO level to figure out how we implement and get these emissions reduced, whether they're through policies, project prioritizations, or what may have it. So we'll continue to come and have those conversations with you all. But I know in the interest of time, and I know Chris has a few things he wanted to discuss with you all as well. I'm happy to answer questions today or another day, so feel free to email me as well. With that,
Thanks.
Chair.
Thank you, Anna. Any questions for Anna? Otherwise, we will move to Chris's presentation. And Chris, I'm curious how long you think you need.
I'll keep this really short. I'll just give it a quick update on on kind of just where things are at with this assessment. Let's go through like 3 slides here. Folks see my screen? Yep. Okay.
Yep.
So big top line items. Back in 2023, legislature was asking us to better understand emissions reduction in the sector. And they said, let's start with projects that we know have an emissions impact. When we expand the trunk highway system, we need to start evaluating emissions impacts of those decisions. And they put together a work group that was tasked with looking at some of these key questions around implementation and making some recommendations. A key one that they made was that looking at just a given project when it comes to emissions is pretty narrow. And so better understanding emissions in regional context and regional decision making was a recommendation from the work group. We can drop into the chat. I think we've actually shared it before. So that's where we're going. What we've been asked to do is really just start to integrate within capacity expansion projects, the not just the safety questions, not just the economic impacts and delay reduction, but now also integrate the impacts on people's environmental health and emissions overall, and to integrate that into the decision-making framework that we use and to prioritize projects. We have under development an initial process for how to conduct this. This is very much a work in progress. We're seeing kind of 3 key steps. The legislature is saying that we need to be identifying emissions impacts earlier in the project development process. And so we're setting up a method for understanding emissions impacts before projects enter STIPs and TIPs. And that doesn't, though, provide you with like full information because you actually haven't selected a project. When a project goes into the STIP, that's not happening until you select your preferred alternative. And so the second step would be doing a more complete assessment once the preferred alternative is selected, and then based on that assessment, a mitigation plan put into place that accounts for the emissions and VMT impacts of that project and then mitigates for it using the 9 categories that the legislature identified and sees as sources for mitigation. I mentioned earlier that we had this work group that the legislature put together to help with this effort. One of the key recommendations that they had was we needed an oversight body for this work to ensure that it's developed in a clear and transparent way and uses the best modeling and methodologies that we have, and also keeps a clear eye on the implementation questions and how do you actually operationalize this. And so we have just formulated a technical advisory committee that was added to the legislation by the legislature. And we've got the following 9 folks. A number of people on this TAC are on that group, and they've got a couple of key milestones. They've just begun meeting in the last couple months here, but the first step that they need to do is develop initial guidance for how to assess projects before they enter next year's STIP. And then in the spring and summer period, additional guidance is going to be developed by them for folks working through this process and understanding how to quantify mitigation activities and develop guidance around evaluating land use changes, voluntary land use changes that could be used for mitigation purposes. I'll just kind of leave it there if there's any questions. But that was quick, but also just kind of wanted to give folks a little bit of an update.
Thanks, Chris. Any questions for Chris on this update here? All right, I am seeing none. Oh, go ahead, Steve.
Thanks. I tried to pause to give everyone else a chance to ask a question, but I did want to pull forward maybe one question that we asked of Anna and Chris during the prep session, and that was, what is the connection between the target setting and this impact analysis? And maybe to paraphrase what I think I heard you say, Chris, was it depends on the implementation that the TAC agrees upon, because if it's let's just say that the metro area has to take on, you know, kind of more than its fair share of the remaining gap of the target, and it's implemented that we have to meet those goals, not just kind of be net neutral. In that case, it could mean kind of millions, if not tens of millions of dollars more for metro projects to be delivered here. But if it is implemented differently, that you just have to be more of kind of net neutral with your project and offset any increase in emissions, then maybe it doesn't matter. The connection between the two isn't. This seems in my mind to be less there. Did I paraphrase that correctly, Chris?
I think you did. And I think the key thing, it's one of the numerous reasons that folks that were supportive and folks that were concerned about this new legislation saw common cause in the need for an oversight body that, and didn't mean to take the trademark name that you all have for this group, but it ended up becoming kind of using the same naming structure of this technical advisory committee. But they are this group that is going to be leaning into these both policy and technical questions. How do you respond to the intent of this legislation and also do it in a way that is implementable and works for communities across the state? So,
yeah, thanks.
All right. So I am going to close us out on this presentation right now. If members have follow-up questions, you can reach out to Anna or Chris with those. And Lyndon is on that technical advisory committee and is a TAC member here as well. So you could reach out to Lyndon with any thoughts as well, I think. And so I am going to, without any objections, adjourn the TAC meeting at this time. And members, please go into your calendars and find the team's invite for your agency specific groups and reconvene there for conversation. Go ahead, Joe. I see your hand up, Joe. Are you?
I was
unmuted?
muted. Sorry.
Okay.
Thanks, Chair. A couple people have emailed and said they're not going to be able to make it, but I think we'll get by with what we have. If we don't, I'll have to try to get something done offline, but I think we'll be okay. Anyway, if that happens, I'll let people know if it seems like we need to reach out.
Let's jump over quick, and then every group should identify someone to send their nomination member to Joe and Elaine after the meeting. We will not come back into WebEx. So once you are done in your group and have that name identified, please email that to Joe and Elaine, and then you are off to your next thing for the day. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jenny.